She found a wedding ring in her drink. The mafia boss confessed, "Years. I've waited years for you." The air inside Aurora smelled of expensive gin, crushed mint, and the heavy, musky cologne worn by men who had too much money and not enough patience. Maya Collins wiped down the mahogany surface of the bar, her movements mechanical and precise. It was 2 a.m. in the coastal city of Riverton, and the Saturday night rush had finally thinned into a low, murmuring hum. Her feet throbbed inside her sensible black non-slip shoes. She shifted her weight from left to right, trying to relieve the pressure on her arches while keeping a polite, professional smile plastered on her face. Behind the smile, however, her mind was a running calculator, tallying up tips against the mounting wall of bills waiting on her kitchen counter. "I need $300 to cover the textbook for advanced macroeconomics," she thought, tossing a used lime wedge into the trash. "And another $800 for the rent before the first of the month." Maya was 23, a graduate student drowning in loans, and a bartender who prided herself on being invisible. She did her job. She mixed perfect old fashions, and she went home. She did not flirt for extra cash, and she definitely did not get involved with the clientele. "Pick up the pace." "Collins," the sharp voice of David, the floor manager, cut through her mental math. He was a short, wiry man who wore suits that were too shiny and held a clipboard like it was a royal decree. "Table 6 is waiting on their bottle service," David snapped, drumming his fingers on the bar. "You are moving like you are wading through molasses." "I am moving as fast as I can." "David," Maya replied, her voice steady, "the ice machine is acting up again. Just get it done," he muttered, turning on his heel to scold a busboy near the entrance. Maya exhaled a long, slow breath and turned back to the ice bin. She was used to this. It was just noise. As long as she kept her head down, the night would end. She would go home, and she would be one shift closer to her degree and a life that did not involve serving alcohol to people who did not say thank you. But then, the atmosphere in the lounge shifted. It was not a sound. Exactly. It was a pressure change, like the drop in the air before a coastal storm hits the boardwalk. The music, a smooth jazz track playing over the hidden speakers, seemed to fade into the background. The conversations at the nearby tables quieted, then resumed at a lower, more respectful volume. Maya looked up, her hands pausing on the cocktail shaker. The double doors at the front of the lounge swung open, held by the lead bouncers who suddenly looked much more alert than they had 5 minutes ago. A group of 4 men walked in. They were dressed in impeccable, tailored suits that cost more than Maya's entire tuition. They moved with a unified, predatory grace, scanning the room without turning their heads. In the center of the formation walked Luca Romano. Maya knew the name. Everyone in Riverton knew the name, though most people only whispered it. He was the owner of Aurora, though he rarely showed his face in the front of the house. He was also the subject of a dozen different rumors involving organized crime, federal investigations, and the kind of power that did not require a badge. He was striking. That was the only word for it. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his charcoal suit. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and hard lines, and his eyes were the color of cold espresso. He did not look around the room like a man seeking approval. He looked like a man who already owned everything he saw. He moved toward the large, semi-private booth in the far corner, the one that was always reserved with a relentless "do not seat" sign, even on the busiest nights. Maya watched him for a second too long. As he settled into the leather banquette, Luca Romano's gaze lifted across the dim lighting, through the haze of smoke and crystal. His eyes locked onto hers. It was a physical sensation, like a static shock. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just looked at her with a quiet, terrifying intensity that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Then, as quickly as it happened, he turned his attention to the man beside him, and the connection was broken. Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding and turned back to her work. Stay away from trouble, she reminded herself. And Luca Romano was the definition of trouble. 20 minutes later, Trouble found her anyway, but not in the form of the boss. A man in a wrinkled blue button-down shirt slammed his empty glass onto the bar. He had been there for 3 hours, drinking whiskey sours and getting progressively louder. "Hit me again, sweetheart," the man slurred, leaning uncomfortably far over the counter. "I think you have had enough for tonight, sir," Maya said, her voice polite but firm. She moved the glass away from him. "Can I call you a cab?" "I did not ask for a cab," the man spat, his face flushing red. "I asked for a drink." "Do your job." "I have done my job," Maya said, taking a step back. "I cannot serve you anymore. It is against the law and house policy." The man's hand shot out, grabbing Maya's wrist before she could retreat. His grip was wet and painfully tight. "Don't you walk away from me," he hissed. "I am a paying customer. You listen to me when I talk to you." "Sir." "Let go of my arm," Maya said, her heart hammering against her ribs. She tried to twist her wrist free, but he yanked her forward, pulling her off balance. "Let go!" she cried out, panic flaring in her chest. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. There was no shouting, no dramatic entrance. One moment, the drunk man was sneering at her. The next, a large hand settled on the man's shoulder. It was a heavy, immovable weight. The man in the blue shirt froze. The lounge went deadly silent. "I believe the lady asked you to let go," a voice said. It was a soft voice. It was low, smooth, and terrifyingly calm. Maya looked up and found Luca Romano standing on the other side of the bar. He wasn't looking at the man. He was looking at the man's hand on Maya's wrist. The drunk man turned his head, annoyance flashing in his blurry eyes, ready to start a fight. Then he saw who was standing behind him. The color drained from his face instantly, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Romano," the man stammered, his grip on Maya loosening immediately. She was being rude. Luca's expression didn't change. He looked bored, but there was a violence coiled beneath his stillness that was impossible to miss. "You are hurting her," Luca said simply. The man snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. "I didn't mean anything by it. I am leaving. I am leaving right now." "Apologize," Luca commanded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I am sorry," the man blurted out, refusing to look Maya in the eye. "I'm very sorry, miss." "Get out," Luca said, "and do not come back." The man stumbled off his stool and practically ran toward the exit, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. The bouncers opened the doors for him with grim faces, and then he was gone. Maya stood frozen behind the bar, rubbing her wrist where the red finger marks were already beginning to bloom. Her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. She looked up at Luca, expecting him to walk away now that the disturbance was handled. He didn't move. He stood there, leaning slightly against the polished wood of the bar, his dark eyes tracing the angry red skin on her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked. His tone was completely different from the one he had used with the customer. It was gentle, almost intimate. It sounded less like a boss asking an employee about a workplace incident and more like a man asking a woman he cared about if she was hurt. "I am fine," Maya managed to say, though her voice trembled. "Thank you, Mr. Romano. I could have handled it, but thank you." Luca's gaze lifted from her wrist to her face. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You should not have to handle men like that," he said quietly. "I am used to it," she said, trying to regain her composure. "It is part of the job. It should not be," Luca replied. He looked as if he wanted to say something else. His hand twitched on the countertop, as if he had an urge to reach out and touch her arm, to check the bruise himself. But he stopped himself, his jaw tightening slightly. "Make sure you put some ice on that, Maya," he said. Then he turned and walked back to his table in the shadows, leaving Maya staring after him, her skin burning not just from the assault, but from the weight of his attention. She realized with a start that she had never told him her name. 2 hours later, the club was closed. The lights were brought up to a harsh cleaning level, and the smell of bleach began to replace the scent of perfume. Maya clocked out and grabbed her heavy coat. She needed fresh air. She needed to breathe. She pushed open the heavy steel door that led to the back alley, stepping out into the cool, damp night air of Riverton. Fog curled around the brick buildings, dampening the sounds of the city traffic. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and dialed. She knew it was late, but she also knew her landlord, Mr. Henderson, was an insomniac who preferred to do business at ungodly hours. Mr. Henderson? It is Maya Collins, she said, leaning her back against the rough brick wall. I got your voicemail. A rasping, impatient voice crackled on the other end. About time you called, girl. Like I said in the message, the property taxes are going up. I have to raise the rent, $200 a month, starting next week. Maya closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. Mr. Henderson, I have a lease. You cannot just raise the rent in the middle of a lease term, and certainly not with 1 week of notice. I can do whatever I want. It is my building. Henderson barked. You do not like it? You can move out. I have a list of people waiting for that apartment who will pay cash and not complain. Please, Maya pleaded, hate curling in her stomach at the sound of her own desperation. I am a student. I am working as many hours as I can. I simply do not have an extra $200 right now. Can we negotiate? Maybe 50 now, and I can... 200 or you are out by Friday, Henderson said, and the line went dead. Maya stared at the phone screen, her vision blurring with angry, hot tears. She let her head thunk back against the brick wall. She slid down until she was crouching on the pavement, hugging her knees to her chest. This was it. This was the breaking point. She worked 60 hours a week. She studied until her eyes burned. She did everything right, everything she was supposed to do to claw her way out of poverty, and it still wasn't enough. Rough night? The deep voice came from the shadows to her left. Maya gasped, scrambling to her feet and wiping her eyes quickly. She hadn't realized anyone else was in the alley. Luca Romano stepped out from the shelter of the doorway, a lit cigarette glowing faintly in his hand. He had shed his suit jacket, and his white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the column of his throat. He looked tired, but just as imposing as he had inside. I am sorry, Maya said, her voice thick with unshed tears. I did not see you there. I was just leaving. He took a slow drag of the cigarette, the orange ember illuminating the sharp planes of his face. I could not help but overhear. He said, The walls are thin. Maya wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Defensive. It is nothing. Just a misunderstanding with my landlord. It sounded like extortion. Luca said calmly. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it beneath the heel of his expensive leather shoe. $200 a month hike? With no notice? That is illegal. Even in Riverton, I know, Maya said, lifting her chin. But knowing it is illegal does not help me when he changes the locks. I will figure it out. Give me his name, Luca said. Maya blinked. What? Your landlord, Luca said, taking a step closer. The movement was fluid, encroaching on her personal space in a way that felt both overwhelming and strangely protective. Give me his name and the address. I will have a conversation with him. The way he said conversation sent a chill down Maya's spine. It was the same tone he had used when he told the drunk man to apologize. It was a word that carried a heavy, unspoken threat. No, Maya said quickly. No, thank you. I can fix it. Maya, Luca said. His voice dropped lower, rumbling in the quiet alley. You would not have to worry about rent. You could just focus on school. Maya looked up at him. He was offering to save her. It would be so easy to say yes, to let this powerful, dangerous man make her problems disappear. But she had spent her whole life learning that nothing was free, especially help from men like him. I do not want to owe you, Mr. Romano, she said, meeting his gaze. Luca looked at her, and for a second, a flicker of something like pain crossed his face. You would not owe me anything. Everyone wants something, Maya whispered. I fight my own battles. I will handle Mr. Henderson. Yeah. She pushed past him, her shoulder brushing against his arm. The contact sent a jolt of heat through her, contrasting sharply with the cold night air. Maya, he said. She stopped, but didn't turn around. He is a fool if he loses you as a tenant, Luca said softly. Be safe getting home. Maya walked away, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't look back, but she could feel his eyes on her until she turned the corner. That night, Maya lay in her bed, staring at the water stains on her ceiling. The stress of the landlord's call was sitting heavy in her chest, but her mind kept drifting back to Luca Romano, to the way he had stepped in at the bar, to the way he had looked at her in the alley. A memory surfaced, unbidden, from the depths of her past. She was 18, a terrified freshman, working the graveyard shift at a run-down diner on the edge of the city. It was 3 a.m, and she was the only waitress on duty. A group of truckers had been harassing her for an hour, making lewd comments, asking what time she got off work. She had been trembling, trying to hide her fear, when a man in the corner booth had stood up. He had been young, maybe barely 20, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. He had walked over to the truckers' table and whispered something to them. Maya never heard what he said, but the truckers had turned pale, paid their bill, and left without another word. When the young man in the hoodie left 10 minutes later, Maya went to clean his table. He had only ordered a black coffee, which cost $2, but under the empty cup, he had left a single, crisp $100 bill. He had been gone before she could say thank you. Maya rolled over in bed, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. She didn't know why she was thinking of that night now. The man in the diner had been a stranger, a ghost. Luca Romano was a wealthy businessman, a mafia prince in a tailored suit. They were nothing alike, and yet the feeling was the same. That strange, confusing mixture of fear and absolute safety. The sense that a predator had stepped between her and the wolves. The next evening, as Maya wiped down the bar at closing time, she looked across the room. Luca was there again, sitting at his corner table. He was talking to one of his associates, his face hard and impassive. A waiter dropped a tray of glasses near him, and the entire room flinched, except Luca, who didn't even blink. Everyone in the room feared him. Maya could see it in the way the staff skirted his table, in the way the patrons lowered their voices when he looked their way. He was dangerous. He was a man who solved problems with violence and intimidation. He looked up. Across the empty tables, across the distance of social class and morality. His eyes found hers again. Maya felt that pull. It was illogical. It was reckless. It was the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would be like to jump. She knew she should be terrified of him. She knew she should run as far away as she could, but as he held her gaze, steady and dark and undeniably possessive, Maya didn't feel afraid. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone, and that terrified her more than any threat he could ever make. The memo appeared on the break room corkboard on a Tuesday afternoon, printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock that looked far too expensive for a simple staff announcement. It was a notice of rebranding. Aurora was no longer just going to be a high-end lounge for the city's wealthy night owls. It was shifting gears to become the premier venue for exclusive, high-profile events in Riverton. Maya stood in front of the board, untying her apron, reading the bold text that promised a new era of luxury and sophistication. Beside her, David, the floor manager, cleared his throat with self-important volume. "It is a big change," David said, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave. "Mr. Romano wants to elevate the clientele. Less foot traffic, more black-tie galas. We need someone to manage the transition." Maya nodded absently, calculating how this might affect her tips. If the bar was closed for private events, her steady income might vanish. She was about to ask if her shifts were safe when David turned to her, a rare, tight smile on his face. "And that brings me to you." "Collins." "Me?" Maya asked, blinking. "Mr. Romano has reviewed the staff files. He noted your organizational skills and your background in," David squinted at his clipboard, "art history and communications." "I am a grad student," Maya corrected automatically. "And yes, those are my majors. Well, whatever they are, they work for him," David said. "He wants you to take point as the special events coordinator. It comes with a salary bump, a new title, and unfortunately for you, a direct line of reporting to the boss himself. You start immediately." Maya felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her feet. A salary bump meant she could stop dodging her landlord's calls. It meant breathing room. But reporting to Luca Romano? The man who had terrified a drunk patron into sobriety with a single whisper? The man whose dark eyes had followed her home in her dreams for the last week? "I do not have any experience planning events," Maya stammered, panic warring with relief. David shrugged, already losing interest. "Tell that to Mr. Romano. He's expecting you in his office in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later." Maya stood before the heavy oak door on the top floor of the building, smoothing down the front of her black slacks. She took a deep breath, knocked twice, and heard a low, resonant voice command her to enter. Luca Romano's office was exactly like the man himself. Dark, imposing, and undeniably expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gray, rain-slicked streets of Riverton. The furniture was leather and dark wood, and the air smelled of old paper and that signature sandalwood cologne. Luca sat behind a massive desk, reading a file. He did not look up immediately, giving Maya a moment to observe him. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes a little deeper than before, but the intensity radiating from him was undiminished. "Sit down, Maya," he said, closing the file. She sat in one of the leather guest chairs, feeling small. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Romano. But I should be honest, I have never coordinated a gala before. I do not need a party planner." "Maya," Luca said, leaning back in his chair, "I can hire a dozen party planners. I need someone I can trust to handle the details while I handle the complexities." Complexities. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. "We are hosting a charity auction in 3 weeks," Luca continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "It needs to be flawless. I want you to handle the vendors, the decor, and the staffing." Maya opened the folder. It was a logistical nightmare. 300 guests, a silent auction, live entertainment. "I can do this," she said, her voice strengthening as her brain switched into academic mode. "But looking at this guest list, we need a theme that softens the room. Something modern. Minimalist florals, warm lighting. We need to make people feel relaxed." "No," Luca said immediately. Maya paused. "No? High security," Luca countered. "We need controlled entry points. The lighting needs to be bright enough for the cameras to pick up faces clearly. And the guest list is vetted by my team, not by ticket sales." Maya frowned. "Mr. Romano, if you light the room like an interrogation cell and surround the guests with armed guards, nobody is going to donate money. They are going to feel like they are under siege. They will be safe," Luca said, his voice hardening. "That is the priority. They are coming to a party, not a bunker," Maya argued, surprised by her own boldness. "If you want this rebranding to work, you have to sell the fantasy, not the security detail. We can hide the security. We can make the safety feel invisible." Luca looked at her, then really looked at her. For a moment, she thought he was going to fire her on the spot for insubordination. But then, the corner of his mouth twitched upward, a microscopic crack in his armor. "Invisible safety," he repeated, testing the words. "You have strong opinions for someone who started 10 minutes ago." "I just want to do a good job," Maya said, clutching the folder to her chest. Luca leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. The movement brought him closer to her, invading her personal bubble even from across the mahogany expanse. His eyes dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before snapping back to her eyes. "Then do a good job, Maya. Prove me right." The weeks that followed were a blur of vendor calls, floral arrangements, and arguments. Maya and Luca clashed constantly. She fought for silk tablecloths. He fought for fire-retardant drapery. She wanted an open floor plan. He wanted strategic choke points. But underneath the friction, there was a low, constant hum that Maya could feel in her teeth. It was in the way he would stop typing when she walked into the room, his gaze following her as she paced in front of the whiteboard. It was in the way he would lean in close to read a document over her shoulder, his heat radiating against her back, making her breath hitch. He never touched her, never said anything inappropriate, but the air between them was becoming so charged that Maya felt like a single spark could burn the whole building down. One Tuesday night, late in the month, The sky over Riverton opened up. It was a torrential downpour, the kind that turned the gutters into rivers and drummed against the roof like gunfire. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago. Maya was in Luca's office, surrounded by stacks of catering contracts, trying to reconcile the budget for the hors d'oeuvres. Luca was at his desk, reviewing what looked like architectural blueprints, though Maya suspected they were security schematics. The only light in the room came from the green-shaded banker's lamp on his desk and the glow of the city through the rain-lashed windows. The silence was comfortable, heavy with the sound of the rain. "I think the caterer is overcharging us for the caviar," Maya murmured, rubbing her temples. "Pay it," Luca said, without looking up. "It's the principle." "Luca," Maya sighed, dropping her pen. "We cannot just throw money at problems. I have found that throwing money at problems is often the most efficient way to solve them," he replied dryly. The lights flickered overhead, once, twice. Then, with a loud click, the main overheads died completely, leaving the office bathed only in the soft, golden pool of light from the desk lamp and the gray ambient glow from the streetlights outside. Maya gasped softly at the sudden darkness. "It is just the storm," Luca said, his voice calm in the shadows. "The generator will kick in for the essential systems, but the main grid is likely down." He stood up and walked over to the small sitting area where Maya had spread out her paperwork on the coffee table. He sat on the edge of the leather sofa, loosening his tie. The dim light cast deep shadows across his face, making his sharp features look softer, younger. "You should go home, Maya," he said quietly. "You've been here since 8 in the morning. I need to finish this," she said, though she made no move to pick up her pen. "I cannot go home anyway. The buses will be running on a delay with this weather." Luca looked at the window, watching the rain hammer against the glass. "I used to love storms like this," he said, his voice distant. "When I was a kid, it felt like the whole world stopped, like nothing bad could happen while the rain was falling because everyone was too busy hiding from it." Maya looked at him, surprised. She rarely heard him talk about his past. "Did you grow up in Riverton?" "Born and raised," Luca said. "Not in this part of town, though. I grew up in the neighborhood down by the docks, the part of the city people pretend does not exist until they need something illegal." Maya knew the area. It was rough, industrial and dangerous. "It must have been hard," she said softly. "It was what it was." Luca shrugged, but his eyes were far away. "I learned quickly that you have two choices in a place like that. You either become the victim or you become the shark. I decided I did not want to be a victim." He looked at his hands, turning them over as if examining the invisible stains on his skin. "But sometimes you get trapped. You make choices to survive, and then you realize those choices built a cage around you. You look for a way out, but the door is locked from the outside." Maya felt a pang of sympathy in her chest. She knew what it felt like to be trapped by debt, by poverty, by the expectations of a world that didn't care if she drowned. Everyone has regrets. "Luca," she whispered. "I have more than most," he replied. He looked up at her then, his dark eyes intense and vulnerable. "There was a diner," he said suddenly, his voice taking on a reverence she had never heard before. "Years ago. A little hole-in-the-wall place near the highway. The food was terrible. The coffee was worse. But I used to go there every night. Why?" Maya asked, entranced by the softness in his tone. "There was a waitress," Luca said. He didn't look at Maya. He looked past her, into the memory. She was young, maybe 18. She worked triple shifts, looking like she was going to collapse from exhaustion. But she never complained. She had this way of smiling at customers. Even the ones who didn't deserve it. She looked terrified half the time, like she was waiting for the world to hurt her. Maya's heart skipped a beat. The image of the diner, the exhaustion, the fear, it felt like a phantom limb. "I used to sit in the corner and watch her," Luca confessed, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "I wanted to help her. I wanted to take her away from that place. But I was not the kind of man who could offer safety. So I just watched. I made sure nobody bothered her while I was there. And then I would leave." He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he had said too much. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unsaid words. Suddenly, a massive crack of thunder shook the entire building. The floor vibrated beneath them, and the window panes rattled in their frames. Maya yelped, instinctively flinching and curling inward before she could even process the fear. Luca was moving. He shifted from the sofa to the floor beside her in one fluid motion, his presence a solid wall between her and the storm. "It is okay," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. "It is just noise. Maya, just noise." He was close. So close she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. Maya looked up, her breath catching in her throat. Luca was kneeling on one knee beside her chair, his face inches from hers. The golden light from the lamp caught the specks of amber in his dark eyes. He wasn't looking at the storm. He was looking at her. His hand lifted slowly, hesitating for a fraction of a second before his fingers brushed against her temple. His touch was electric, a stark contrast to the cool dampness of the room. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on the sensitive skin of her cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. It was the touch of a man handling something fragile, something precious. "Maya," he breathed. Her name sounded like a prayer on his lips. Maya couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she was sure he could hear it. The air between them crackled, charged with weeks of stolen glances and suppressed desire. He leaned in. It was slow, inevitable. His gaze dropped to her lips, dark and hungry. Maya's lips parted slightly, an unconscious invitation. She felt herself leaning forward, drawn into his gravity. She wanted this. God, she wanted this. She wanted to know what it felt like to be held by him, to be claimed by him. His face was so close now that his warm breath ghosted across her cheek. He tilted his head, his eyes fluttering shut. Panic flared in Maya's chest. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of everything else. He was her boss. He was dangerous. He was a man who spoke of violence in cages. If she crossed this line, there was no going back. She pulled back, jerking her head away with a nervous, breathless laugh. I need to catch the last bus," she stammered, her voice high and unnatural. The spell shattered. Luca froze. His hand fell from her cheek, hovering in the air for a second before dropping to his side. He opened his eyes, and for a moment, Maya saw a flash of raw, naked hurt. Then, the mask slammed back down. The businessman returned. "Of course," Luca said, his voice tight. He stood up, smoothing his tie, stepping back into the shadows. The intimacy of the moment evaporated, leaving only the cold reality of the office. "I should go," Maya said, scrambling to gather her papers. "I am sorry. I lost track of time." "Forget the bus," Luca said. His back was to her now, looking out at the rain. "I will drive you." "No, that is not necessary," Maya protested. "It is pouring, Maya, and it is late. I am not letting you stand on a street corner in this weather. I am driving you." It wasn't a question. It was a command. The ride to her apartment was suffocatingly quiet. Luca drove a black luxury sedan that smelled of leather and rain. The windshield wipers swished back and forth, a hypnotic rhythm that did nothing to calm Maya's racing nerves. She sat in the passenger seat, hugging her bag to her chest, acutely aware of how small the space was. Every time the car turned a corner, her knee almost brushed against his leg. The tension inside the car was thick enough to choke on. She glanced at him sideways. Luca was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. His hands were gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white with the force of his restraint. He looked like a man fighting a war inside his own head. He wanted to reach for her. She could feel it. She could feel the magnetic pull of his body toward hers, fighting the rigid control he was imposing on himself. Why did he have to be so... everything? Why did he have to be the man who protected her at the bar, the man who cared about her landlord, the man who remembered a waitress from years ago with such tenderness? They pulled up to the curb of her building. It was a run-down brick structure, looking even bleaker in the rain. Luca killed the engine. He didn't unlock the doors immediately. He He just sat there for a moment in the silence. "Thank you for the ride," Maya whispered. "Wait," Luca said. He opened his door and stepped out into the deluge. By the time he walked around to the passenger side, he had opened a large black umbrella. He pulled her door open. Maya stepped out. The sidewalk was slick with oil and water. As she moved to step up onto the curb, the heel of her boot skidded on a wet patch of concrete. She gasped, her arms flailing as gravity took over. She didn't hit the ground. Luca moved with terrifying speed, one arm clamped around her waist, catching her mid-fall and yanking her upright. The momentum swung her around, slamming her flush against his body. The umbrella tumbled from his hand. Forgotten. For a second, the world stopped. Maya was pressed chest to chest with Luca Romano in the pouring rain. Her hands had instinctively flown up to clutch his shoulders to steady herself. His arm was a band of steel around her waist, holding her so tightly her feet were barely touching the ground. She could feel the heat of him soaking through her wet clothes. She could feel the rapid, heavy thud of his heart beating against hers. They stared at each other. Rainwater dripped from his hair, running down the sharp planes of his face. His eyes were wide, blown dark with adrenaline, and something else, something raw and desperate. He wasn't letting go. His grip tightened, his fingers digging into the fabric of her coat. He looked at her like he wanted to devour her. He looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. "Maya," he growled, his voice rough, barely audible over the sound of the rain. Maya's breath hitched. She should push him away. She should run inside, but her fingers curled into the wet fabric of his shirt, holding on. She felt safe. In the arms of the most dangerous man she knew, she felt completely, utterly safe. But the fear of the unknown, the fear of his world, was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. She forced herself to pull back. "Thank you," she breathed, the words trembling. She stepped out of his embrace. The loss of his warmth was instant and painful, like stepping out into a blizzard. Luca's hands remained in the air for a second, empty, before he slowly lowered them to his sides. He stood in the rain, ignoring the water soaking his expensive suit. His jaw was set hard, his teeth clenched. He looked like he was in physical pain. "Go inside, Maya," he said, his voice straining with the effort of not reaching for her again. "Go inside before I do something we both regret." Maya turned and ran up the steps to her building, fumbling for her keys. She didn't look back until she was safely inside the vestibule. Through the glass door, she watched him. Luca was still standing on the curb, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He was watching her door, his expression a heartbreaking mixture of restraint and profound, aching longing. He looked like a man who had waited a lifetime for something he couldn't touch. He stood there for a long moment, guarding her until she vanished up the stairs, before finally turning back to his car and driving away into the night. The summer heat in Riverton broke with the violence of a fever, replaced by a cold, persistent drizzle that turned the city pavements into slick mirrors reflecting the neon lights of patrol cars. The local news stations were in a frenzy, their tickers running non-stop with headlines about the sudden escalation in gang violence. A new player had entered the board, the Kane Syndicate. They were brutal, loud, and hungry for territory that had belonged to the Romano family for decades. Inside Aurora, the atmosphere had curdled. The usual air of relaxed luxury was laced with a quiet, vibrating tension. The staff moved with their heads down, whispering in hushed tones near the service stations. "I heard they hit a warehouse on the south side last night," a bartender whispered to Maya as she sliced lemons. "2 guys in the hospital." "They would not touch us here," another waiter replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "We are protected. The boss owns this place. That is exactly why we are a target," Maya thought, her stomach twisting into a cold knot. She tried to focus on her clipboard, checking the inventory list for the night, but her hands were unsteady. Since that night in the rain, when Luca had held her against him and then walked away, a wall had gone up between them. He was still her boss, still the man who signed her checks, but he was distant now, watching her from across the room with eyes that looked like shut doors. The Friday night rush hit at 11 o'clock. The music thumped a heavy, hypnotic bass line, and the VIP section was at capacity. Maya stood near the velvet rope, acting as the gatekeeper while the regular host took a break. A man approached the rope. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive from a distance but cheap up close. The fabric too shiny, the fit slightly off. He didn't have the bored, languid expression of the usual wealthy clientele. His eyes were darting around the room, nervous and predatory. "I am going in," the man said, moving to step around the rope without slowing down. Maya stepped into his path, her hand raised in a polite stop gesture. "Good evening, sir. May I have your name for the list?" "I do not need a list," the man snapped. His hand twitched toward the inside of his jacket. "Move." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Maya said, her voice firm despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "The VIP lounge is strictly by reservation only. If you give me your name, I can check with the manager." The man's face twisted into a snarl. He lunged forward, his shoulder colliding with hers, trying to shove her aside. "Get out of my way, bitch!" Maya stumbled back, losing her footing, but she grabbed the velvet rope to steady herself, blocking him again. "Security!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the music. The reaction was instantaneous. Two of Luca's men, who had been standing inconspicuously near the pillars, descended on the man before he could take another step. They didn't move like bar bouncers breaking up a drunk fight. They moved like soldiers neutralizing a threat. One of them grabbed the man's arm, twisting it behind his back with a sickening pop that was audible even over the bass. The man screamed, a high, thin sound that was immediately cut off as the second guard slammed him face first into the wall. "Gun!" one of the guards shouted, pulling a dark metal pistol from the man's jacket. The room erupted in gasps and screams. The music cut out. Maya stood frozen, staring at the weapon. It was not a prop. It was real, heavy, and lethal. The man had been seconds away from entering the VIP room where Luca was sitting. "Get him out the back," a voice commanded. Luca was there. He had appeared from the shadows of the lounge, his face a mask of terrifying calm. He didn't look at the assassin being dragged away, his heels scraping lines into the expensive carpet. He looked at Maya. He crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, grabbing her upper arm. His grip was hard, painful. "Come with me," he said. He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled her through the service door and into the narrow, concrete hallway that ran behind the kitchen. The noise of the club faded instantly, replaced by the hum of the industrial refrigerators and the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights. Luca released her, spinning around to pace the small space like a caged tiger. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect style. "What the hell were you thinking?" he roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Maya rubbed her arm where he had grabbed her, shock giving way to a sudden, blazing anger. "I was doing my job. That man was trying to break in. You should have let him pass," Luca shouted, turning on her. "You do not stand in the way of a man like that. Did you see the gun? Did you see it? Maya? If he had panicked, if he had pulled that trigger, you would be dead on the floor right now." "I did not know he had a gun," Maya yelled back, stepping toward him. "Because nobody tells me anything. I am just the event coordinator, right? I am just the girl who checks the list. You let me walk around that floor blind while you are fighting a war. I'm trying to keep you out of it." Luca slammed his hand against the wall, the sound like a gunshot. "I keep you in the dark so you do not have to see this filth. I keep you away so you are not a target, and then you throw yourself in front of a bullet for me? Do not ever do that again. I did not do it for you." Maya lied, her voice shaking. "I did it because it is my job to protect this place. Your job is to survive," Luca said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He stepped closer, towering over her, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and terror. "Do you think I care about the club? Do you think I care about the money? If something happened to you—" He stopped, his chest heaving. "If something happened to me—" "What?" Maya challenged, breathless. "You do not understand," Luca said, shaking his head. "You think this is a game. You think because I wear a suit and buy you drinks that we are playing house, this is my life. Maya, Violence is not an accident here. It is the foundation. Then maybe I should not be here, Maya said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Luca looked at her, his expression shattering. For a second, he looked like the boy from the diner again, lost and desperate. Then he closed his eyes and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Maybe you were right, he said. He turned and walked down the hallway, leaving her alone under the buzzing lights. In the days that followed, Maya pulled away. She didn't quit. She couldn't afford to. Not with the student loans looming and the rent hike still stinging. But she built a wall. She stopped lingering after her shifts. She answered Luca's texts about work with one-word replies. Yes. No. Done. She needed to breathe. She needed to remember what the world looked like outside of Luca Romano's orbit. She accepted an invitation for coffee from Daniel Reyes. Daniel was a detective with the Riverton Police Department. He had been coming into Aurora for weeks, asking polite questions, sipping water and watching. He was handsome in a traditional, safe way, clean-cut, kind eyes, a smile that didn't hide any secrets. They met at a small cafe on the pier, far away from the dark glamour of the lounge. The sun was shining, seagulls were crying overhead, and the air smelled of salt and waffle cones. You look tired, Maya, Daniel said gently, wrapping his hands around a mug of black coffee. It has been a long week, Maya admitted, stirring sugar into her latte. I heard about the incident on Friday. Daniel said his voice wasn't accusatory, just concerned. That guy they dragged out? He's a known associate of the Kane Syndicate, a hitman. Maya stared at her cup. I did not know. I know you didn't, Daniel said. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Look, I know Luca Romano has a reputation. I know he can be charismatic. But guys like him, they pull everything around them into the black hole. I am just an employee. Daniel. Are you? Daniel asked softly. Because from where I am sitting, it looks like he is keeping you very close. Maya didn't answer. Daniel reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, dry, and steady. It felt nice. It felt normal. Smart people do not stand near the blast radius when guys like him go down, Daniel said. And he is going to go down. Maya, the feds are circling. The Canes are pushing. It is only a matter of time. You deserve a life that does not involve checking for exits every time you walk into a room. Maya looked out the window. Across the street, a black sedan was idling at the curb. The windows were tinted, but for a moment, she thought she saw a silhouette she recognized. Inside the car. Luca watched them. He saw Daniel reach for Maya's hand. He saw the way Maya didn't pull away. He saw the sunlight catching in her hair, making her look golden and free. A jagged shard of jealousy twisted in his gut, sharp and hot. He wanted to get out of the car. He wanted to walk across the street, pull Daniel out of that chair, and break his hands. He wanted to drag Maya back to his world, to keep her where he could see her. But he didn't move. Daniel Reyes was a good man. He was a cop. He could offer her safety. He could offer her a life where she didn't have to worry about bullets flying in her workplace. If you love her, Luca thought, his grip on the steering wheel tightening until the leather creaked, you have to let her go. He put the car in gear and drove away, leaving her in the light. The peace didn't last. 3 days later, Maya came home from an afternoon class to find her apartment door slightly ajar. She froze in the hallway, her keys clutched in her hand like a weapon. She knew she had locked it. She was obsessive about locking it. She pushed the door open with her foot. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no answer. She stepped inside. The place hadn't been ransacked. Her laptop was still on the table. Her TV was still on the stand. But things were wrong. A drawer was slightly open. The cushions on the couch were askew. And the lock on the front door had deep, angry scratches around the keyhole. Someone had been here. Fear, cold and slimy, washed over her. She backed out of the apartment, fumbling for her phone. She didn't call the police. She didn't call Daniel. Without thinking, her thumb hovered over Luca's name. Before she could press the button, her phone rang. It was him. "Do not go inside." Luca's voice barked through the speaker. He sounded out of breath. I am already here, Maya whispered. The door was open. Get out, Luca ordered. Go downstairs. My men are 30 seconds away. I am 2 minutes behind them. They were waiting for her. 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of her building before she even reached the sidewalk. 4 men jumped out, surrounding her, scanning the rooftops and the street. Then Luca's car arrived. He didn't park. He just abandoned the vehicle in the middle of the street and ran to her. Are you hurt? He demanded, grabbing her shoulders, his eyes scanning her frantically for injuries. Did you see them? No, Maya said, shaking her head. I just got home. The door was open. He cursed in Italian, a low, vicious sound. He turned to his men. Sweep it top to bottom. If you find so much as a dust bunny out of place, I want to know. They waited on the sidewalk while the team went upstairs. Maya hugged her arms around herself, shivering despite the mild weather. Luca stood beside her, radiating a heat that was almost painful. He didn't touch her again, but he stood close enough that she could smell the scent of gunpowder and mint on his clothes. 10 minutes later, the head of security came back down. He was holding a small plastic bag. Inside was a tiny, black disc. We found it in the bedroom, the man said grimly, behind the headboard. It is a transmitter, high range. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. In her bedroom. Someone had been in her bedroom. Someone had been listening to her sleep. Pack a bag, Luca said. His voice was flat, brokering no argument. What? Maya asked, staring at the bug in the bag. You are not staying here, Luca said. It is compromised. You are coming with me to a secure building. I have a safe house uptown. No, Maya said, stepping back. I am not going to a safe house. I am not going anywhere with you. Maya, be reasonable, Luca snapped. The Kane Syndicate knows where you live. They have been listening to you. Because of you, Maya shouted, her fear turning into a defensive fury. They are listening to me because of you. And now you want to move me into another one of your buildings. You want to put me in a cage so you can keep an eye on your property? Property? Luca looked as if she had slapped him. You think I think of you as property? You are trying to control everything, Maya cried. My job, my apartment, my life. I am not a pawn on your chessboard. Luca, I am trying to keep you alive. Why me? Maya demanded. Why are they targeting me? I am just a bartender. Because they know. Luca roared. The street went silent. His chest was heaving. He looked at her, his eyes wild and unguarded. They know, he said, his voice dropping to a rough rasp. They know that you are the only thing in this world I give a damn about. They know you are my weakness. Maya stared at him, the air leaving her lungs. You are a pressure point, Maya, Luca whispered, stepping closer. If they want to hurt me, they do not come for my money. They do not come for my territory. They come for you. He took her arm, gently this time. Let me take you somewhere safe, please. Maya looked at the apartment building that had been her sanctuary, now violated and cold. She looked at Luca, the man who brought the danger but was also the only one standing between her and the wolves. Okay, she whispered. The safe house was a penthouse in a building made of steel and glass. High above the city, it was beautiful, sterile, and cold. Luca walked her inside, checking every room personally, opening closets, checking window locks. Maya stood in the living room, hugging her elbows, listening to the muffled sounds of the city below. When Luca came back into the room, he looked exhausted. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked by faint, white scars. It is clean, he said. There are guards in the lobby and on the elevator. Nobody gets in without me knowing. Thank you, Maya said stiffly. Luca didn't leave. He stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. I saw you, he said quietly. With the detective. Maya stiffened. You were following me? I always have eyes on you. Maya. For safety. Is that what you call it? I saw the way you looked at him. Luca continued, ignoring her jab. When he looks like a good man. Safe. He is, Maya said. He warned me about you. I'm sure he did, and he was right. Luca turned around. His face was a mask of agony. Seeing you with him, seeing him touch your hand, it felt like being gutted. Maya. It felt like someone reached inside my chest and tore everything out. Maya's breath hitched. She took a step toward him, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. "I tried to walk away," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "I tried to leave you alone, but I cannot. I simply cannot." He was trembling. This man, who stared down assassins and broke men's bones without blinking, was shaking because he was looking at her. Maya stepped closer. The fear was still there, buzzing in the back of her mind, but the desire was louder. It was a roar in her ears. She reached out and touched his arm. "Luca," she whispered. He moved instantly. He cupped her face with both huge hands, his thumbs brushing fast, desperate strokes across her cheekbones. He looked at her like a starving man looks at a feast. "Maya?" He groaned. He lowered his head and captured her lips. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was in collision. It was slow, deep, and intensely hot. He tasted of mint and whiskey and danger. Maya let out a soft sound in her throat, her fingers clutching at the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. Luca groaned against her mouth, his arms wrapping around her, crushing her against his chest, their bodies aligned perfectly, the hard planes of his chest against the softness of hers. She could feel the heat of him, the power of him, seeping into her skin. His hand slid down from her face to her waist and then to the small of her back, pressing her hips into his. She arched into him instinctively, her head falling back, surrendering to the overwhelming tide of sensation. For a moment, there was no Kane syndicate, no bugs in the wall, no debt. There was only Luca, and the way his mouth moved on hers, demanding and giving everything at once. He pulled her tighter, lifting her slightly off the floor, and Maya wrapped her legs around him, needing to be closer, needing to bridge the gap between their worlds with nothing but skin and breath. Then, her hand brushed against something hard at his waist, the gun. It was tucked into his waistband, cold metal against warm skin. The reality of it crashed into Maya like a bucket of ice water. She gasped, tearing her mouth away from his, pushing against his chest. "No," she gasped, breathless and dizzy. "No, stop." Luca froze instantly. He didn't let her drop, but he stopped moving. He lowered her slowly until her feet touched the floor. His eyes were blown wide, dark pools of desire and confusion. "What?" he rasped. "What is it? I can't," Maya whispered, backing away from him. She was breathing hard, her lips swollen, her heart racing. "I can't do this. Maya, I can't fall for you. Luca," she said, her voice trembling with tears. "I can't fall for a man who lives on violence. I can't be the woman waiting at home wondering if you are going to come back in a body bag or if you are going to bring the war to my doorstep." Luca stared at her. The passion drained from his face, replaced by a stark, hollow devastation. He looked at her as if she had just shot him. "I would protect you," he whispered. "You can't," Maya said, crying now. "You just said it yourself. I am a target because of you. The closer I get, the more dangerous it becomes." She wrapped her arms around herself, turning away from him. "Please go." The silence in the room was deafening. Luca stood there for a long time. She could feel his gaze on her back, heavy and aching. She wanted him to argue. She wanted him to fight for her. She wanted him to tell her that he would quit, that he would burn the club down and walk away. But he didn't. He knew, better than she did, that you couldn't just walk away. "I will have guards posted at the door," Luca said. His voice was dead, void of all emotion. "You are safe here." He walked to the door. The sound of his footsteps was heavy. He paused with his hand on the handle. "I am sorry." "Maya," he said softly. Then the door clicked shut, and she was alone in the glass tower, safe and shattered. The weeks that followed Maya's move to the penthouse were a study in suffocating luxury. The apartment was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Riverton, but it felt less like a home and more like a high-end aquarium. Maya tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She went to her classes, she went to her shifts at Aurora, and she tried to pretend that her life had not been completely hijacked by the city's most dangerous man. But Luca was everywhere. He was not physically present most of the time. He kept his distance, true to his word, but his influence was a heavy, tangible weight. It was in the black SUV that idled at the curb when she walked out of her university lecture hall. It was in the burly men in suits who stood at the corners of the bar while she worked, watching the crowd with shark-like intensity. It was in the substantial bonus that appeared on her paycheck, labeled simply as a housing stipend. Maya tried to rebuild the walls she had erected. She threw herself into the planning of the next event, obsessing over table linens and lighting schematics until her eyes burned. She answered Luca's emails with curt, professional sentences. She told herself she was independent. She told herself she was just an employee. But at night, in the silence of the penthouse, she would lie awake and remember the feeling of his hands on her face. The memory of that almost kiss burned in her chest, a slow, steady heat that refused to fade. She continued to meet with Daniel Reyes. The detective had become her anchor to the real world, a reminder that there was a life outside of Luca's gilded cage. They met on a Tuesday afternoon in a park near the waterfront. The autumn wind was picking up, stripping the leaves from the trees, and the air smelled of brine and decay. "You look safer," Daniel observed, handing her a paper cup of tea, "but you do not look happier." "I am fine," Maya said, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "Just busy. The new event schedule is grueling." Daniel watched her over the rim of his cup. He looked like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded manila envelope. "I found something." "Maya," he said, his voice serious, "I was digging into the Romano family financials, looking for leverage. I found a connection to you." Maya frowned. "To me? I told you, I am just an employee. I have only worked there for a few months, not to you directly," Daniel corrected. "To your father." Maya felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. Her father had died 3 years ago, leaving behind a legacy of love, bad jokes, and a mountain of gambling debt that had almost crushed her mother before she passed away, too. "What about him?" Maya asked, her voice tight. Daniel tapped the envelope. 6 years ago, your father owed $50,000 to a loan shark named Jimmy Vane. Vane was a bad guy. Maya, the kind who broke legs first and asked for payment later. Your father was weeks away from losing the house." "I know," Maya whispered, looking down at her boots. "We thought we were going to be homeless. Then Dad said he worked it out. He said he found a consolidation loan. He did not find a loan," Daniel said gently. "Someone paid Vane, in cash, $50,000, plus interest. Vane walked away, and your father kept the house." Maya stared at him. "Who?" "The payment came from a shell company called Janus Holdings." Daniel said, "It is a dummy corporation used to wash money. I traced the ownership. It leads back to a trust managed by the Romano family." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Maya took the envelope with trembling fingers. She opened it and stared at the photocopied bank records. There it was. The date. The amount. "The name of the holding company. Luca?" she breathed. "But I did not know him then. That was 6 years ago. I was just starting college. I was nobody." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe your father knew him. Maybe he did a favor for the family." "No." Maya shook her head, her mind racing. "My dad was a high school history teacher with a gambling problem. He did not know mafia bosses." Daniel looked at her with pity. "Look, Maya, I do not know why he did it, but this proves he has been in your life a lot longer than you think. He bought your safety years ago, and men like Luca Romano, they do not give away $50,000 out of the kindness of their hearts. They consider it an investment." Maya felt sick. She felt hollowed out. All this time, she thought she had survived by her own grit. She thought she had saved herself. But he had been there, pulling strings, owning her before she even knew his name. "I have to go," Maya said abruptly, standing up. "Maya, wait," Daniel called, but she was already walking away. Clutching the envelope to her chest like a shield, she went straight to the penthouse. She didn't turn on the lights. She went to the small safe where she kept her own meager records, her birth certificate, her parents' death certificates, the old deed to the house. She pulled out the paperwork from that year. She sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, cross-referencing everything with the documents Daniel had given her. It was all there. The fine print she had never understood at 18, the transfer of the lien, the forgiveness of the debt signed by a representative of Janus Holdings. She felt a wave of betrayal so strong it made her dizzy. He had known. All those nights at the bar, when she was serving him drinks, when she was trying to keep her distance. He had known that he practically owned the roof over her head. He had let her struggle, let her worry about student loans, all while holding the deed to her past. It felt like manipulation. It felt like he had bought a ticket to her life without her permission. She stood up, grabbing the papers. She didn't call him. She didn't text. She walked out of the apartment, ignored the startled look of the guard in the hallway, and took the elevator down to the garage. 20 minutes later, she stormed into Aurora. The club was closed, the cleaning crew moving silently through the shadows. Maya marched past them, up the stairs and straight to the double doors of Luca's office. She didn't knock. She threw the doors open. Luca was on the phone, standing by the window. He turned, startled by the intrusion. When he saw her face, pale, furious, and streaked with tears, he hung up the phone without a word and dropped it on his desk. "Maya," he said, taking a step forward. "What is wrong? Has something happened?" Maya marched across the room and slammed the stack of papers onto his desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You tell me," she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "You tell me what this is." Luca looked down at the papers. He didn't need to read them. He recognized the letterhead. He recognized the dates. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened, the muscles visible beneath his white dress shirt. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" Maya shouted. "Is it true? Did you pay off my father's debt? Did you save our house?" "Yes," Luca said. "Why?" Maya demanded. She felt like she was going to shatter. "I did not know you then. I was 18 years old. Why would you spend $50,000 on a stranger? Was it a game? Did you just want to own me? Is that what this is? Do you collect people like you collect businesses?" "No," Luca said sharply. "It was never about owning you." "Then what?" Maya cried, throwing her hands up. "Explain it to me, Luca. Because right now, I feel like my entire life is a lie. I feel like I've been a puppet on your strings for 6 years. You watched me struggle. You watched me work double shifts. And all this time, you were the one holding the debt." "I forgave the debt," Luca said, his voice rising. "I never asked for a penny. I never contacted you. I never used it against you. But you knew," Maya screamed. "You knew who I was. You let me walk into this bar, let me serve you, let me fear you. And you never said a word." "I could not say a word," Luca shouted back. The silence that followed was ringing. Luca walked around the desk. He looked agitated, his composure cracking. He ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly younger, burdened by a weight she couldn't see. "You want to know why?" he asked, his voice rough. "You want the truth?" "Yes," Maya whispered. Luca walked over to the leather sofa and sat down heavily, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. "I was 20 years old," he began softly. "I was a low-level enforcer. My father had just been killed. My uncle was beating the humanity out of me day by day, trying to turn me into a weapon. I hated my life. I hated what I was becoming." He looked up at her then, his eyes dark and unguarded. "I used to go to that diner. Maya, not because the food was good, but because it was the only place in the city where nobody knew my name. Nobody looked at me like I was a monster." Maya stood frozen, the anger in her chest faltering. "You were there," Luca said. "You were the waitress. You were the only one who looked me in the eye. You were terrified. I could see it in your hands when you poured the coffee. But you were kind. You defended me when the manager tried to kick me out for loitering. You asked me if I was okay after a fight, even though I was bleeding and scary as hell." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I was a ghost to everyone else. But you saw me." Maya's mind flashed back. The hoodie, the dark corner, the silence. "One night, I heard you crying in the back. Luca continued. You were on the phone with your dad. You were begging him to stop gambling. You were talking about the house, about where you would sleep if they took it. He stood up and walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. I had just made my first real money, Luca said. Blood money. I did not want it. It felt dirty in my hands. So I used it. I found out who held your father's debt, and I paid it. He reached out, his hand hovering near her but not touching. I did not do it to own you, Maya. I did it because watching you fight so hard for your family, while I was watching mine destroy itself, it gave me something to believe in. I promised myself that I would not let the world swallow you. His confession hung in the air, raw and unvarnished. I told myself that if I could protect you, maybe I was not completely lost, Luca whispered. I climbed the ranks, I took power, I became the boss, and I told myself that one day I would be powerful enough to walk away, that I would be clean enough to walk into that diner and talk to you without shame. He dropped his hand. But I never got clean. Maya, the dirt does not wash off. So I stayed away until you walked into Aurora. Maya stared at him. The anger that had propelled her here was gone, replaced by an aching, overwhelming tenderness. She looked at the man in the expensive suit and saw the boy he had been, scared, violent, and desperately lonely, sitting in a diner booth, trying to save a stranger because he couldn't save himself. He hadn't bought her. He had saved her, and he had asked for nothing in return. Tears blurred her vision. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. He had been loving her, in his own broken way, for years. I remember you, she whispered. Luca went still. I remember the hoodie, she said, her voice trembling. I remember the way you scared off those truckers. I remember the $100 you left on the table. She took a step closer to him, the boy in the corner. That was you. Yes, Luca rasped. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Thunder rumbled, low and deep, shaking the window panes. Rain began to lash against the glass, isolating them in the dim office. The air between them changed. It was no longer charged with anger. It was charged with a magnetic, desperate need. You waited, Maya said, tears spilling over her cheeks. You waited all this time. I would have waited forever, Luca said. He looked at her with such intense devotion that Maya felt her knees go weak. The fear of his world, the fear of the danger, it didn't vanish, but it suddenly seemed manageable. It seemed small compared to the vastness of what stood in front of her. She didn't want to run anymore. She didn't want to be safe if being safe meant being without him. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. She reached out and rested her forehead against his chest. She could feel his heart pounding, a frantic, heavy rhythm that betrayed his calm exterior. He was terrified. He was terrified that she was going to walk out the door and never come back. Luca, she breathed. He went rigid, his breath hitching. He didn't move to hold her, as if he was afraid he would break her if he touched her. She lifted her head. She saw him searching her eyes, looking for permission, looking for a sign that she wasn't going to run. She gave it to him. She tilted her chin up, her lips parting. Luca let out a sound that was half groan, half prayer. He closed the distance. They met halfway. The kiss was not tentative. It was a collision of years of silence. It was desperate. It was hungry. It was the taste of rain and whiskey and longing. Luca's arms wrapped around her, pulling her in so tight she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. Maya's hands flew up to frame his face, her fingers threading into his thick, dark hair. Pulling him deeper, she opened to him, welcoming the invasion, matching his intensity. She felt his hands slide down her back, pressing her against him, molding her body to his. I love you. She didn't say the words, but she poured them into the kiss. Luca pulled back for a fraction of a second, just to breathe, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were squeezed shut, his lashes dark against his flushed skin. Maya, he murmured, his voice wrecked. God, Maya, I have waited so long to hold you like this. He kissed her again, deeper this time, a slow, consuming burn that set her blood on fire. He walked her backward, his movements blind but sure, until the back of her legs hit the edge of his heavy oak desk. He lifted her effortlessly, setting her on the edge of the desk. He stepped between her legs, pressing his chest to hers, his palms splaying across her waist, his thumbs digging into her hips as if to anchor her there. They paused, breathing hard, their faces inches apart. The room was dark, lit only by the flashes of lightning outside. Maya looked at him. She saw the danger. She saw the scars. She saw the man who could kill with his bare hands, and she saw the man who had paid $50,000 to save a girl he didn't know. She made her choice. "I am tired, Luca," she whispered, her hands resting on his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. He froze, his eyes searching hers, fear flickering in the depths. "Tired of what?" "I'm tired of pretending I do not want you," she said softly. "I am tired of running." Luca let out a shuddering breath. He leaned his forehead against hers. "Are you sure? Maya, once we cross this line, I cannot let you go. I will not be able to let you go. I do not want you to let go," she answered. She pulled him back to her. The narrative of the night shifted into something hushed and sacred. It was the slide of fabric against skin, the warmth of hands exploring territory that had been forbidden for too long. It was the way Luca looked at her, with a reverence that made her feel like a queen, and the way he touched her, with a desperate, trembling restraint. He worshipped her. Every touch was a confession, every kiss a promise. He held her as if she were made of glass, yet kissed her with a passion that threatened to consume them both. When the final barriers fell away, and they were simply a man and a woman in the dark, the fear of the outside world dissolved. There was only the sound of the rain, the heavy rhythm of their breathing, and the profound, aching relief of finally coming home. The morning sun broke through the gray clouds with a cruel, blinding brightness. Maya woke up in the bedroom adjacent to the office. She was wrapped in high thread count sheets, her body humming with a pleasant, heavy exhaustion. For a few minutes, she lay there, listening to the sound of the shower running in the bathroom, smiling at the memory of the night. She felt changed. She felt solid. Then, the door to the office opened. The shower had stopped. Luca walked in. He was fully dressed. He was wearing a fresh suit. His tie knotted perfectly tight. His hair was wet and slicked back. But the softness from the night before was gone. His face was pale, his expression grim and stony. "Luca?" Maya sat up, then pulling the sheet around her, the cold reality of the morning settling over her skin. "What is it?" Luca walked to the edge of the bed. He looked down at her, and she saw pain in his eyes. Deep, sharp pain. "Do not turn on the TV," he said, his voice flat. "What happened?" Maya asked, fear spiking in her chest. Victor Kane made a move. Luca said, he reached for the remote on the bedside table, but instead of handing it to her, he put it in his pocket. "They hit the warehouse on 4th Street an hour ago." He said, "My warehouse. It was a processing center for the legitimate shipping business I am trying to build. Was anyone hurt?" Maya whispered. Luca looked away, his jaw working. "My lieutenant, Carlo. You met him once. The older man who held the door for you." Maya nodded, remembering a kind face with a scar on his chin. "He is dead," Luca said. "They killed him, and they left a message." "What message?" "They knew the shift change schedule. Maya, they knew exactly when security would be thinnest. That information. It is not written down. It is only known by my inner circle." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "A traitor," she breathed. "Yes," Luca said, looking back at her. "There is a rat in my house. Someone close to me is feeding Kane information." He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her, as if his touch would taint her now. "And if they know about the warehouse schedule," Luca said, his voice cracking, "then they know about you. They know you are here. They know what you mean to me." He looked at her, and the despair in his eyes was terrifying. "I thought I could protect you," he whispered, "but I was wrong. I have just painted a target on your back." Maya reached for his hand, but he stood up before she could touch him. "Get dressed, Maya," he said, his voice turning cold and authoritative, the mask slamming back into place. We are going into lockdown. You are not leaving my sight. Not for a second, He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the sunlight. The warmth of the night replaced by the chilling certainty that the war had finally arrived. The silence in Luca's office was not peaceful. It was suffocating. 3 days had passed since the storm, since the night the world had narrowed down to just the two of them in the dark. Maya had woken up that next morning expecting a new reality, a partnership forged in honesty. Instead, she had walked into a wall of ice. Luca sat behind his massive oak desk, reviewing security protocols for the upcoming gala. He did not look up when Maya entered. He was wearing a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored. His tie knotted tight against his throat. The vulnerable, desperate man who had held her against this very desk, whispering promises against her skin, was gone. In his place sat the Don of the Romano family. Here are the revised vendor lists. Mr. Romano, Maya said, placing the folder on the corner of his desk. She kept her voice steady, refusing to let him hear the tremor in her throat. Leave it, Luca said, without looking at her. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth. Maya lingered. Is there anything else? No. Luca, she started, stepping closer. Can we talk about... There is nothing to talk about. Maya. He cut her off, finally lifting his eyes. They were cold, hard flint. What happened the other night was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. It will not happen again. Maya felt the words like a physical slap. A mistake? A mistake, she repeated, her voice rising. You told me you waited years. You told me. I said a lot of things, Luca interrupted, returning his gaze to the paperwork. Adrenaline makes people say foolish things. I am your employer. You are my employee. We crossed a line. Now we are stepping back. Maya stared at him, humiliation burning hot in her chest. She felt exposed, foolish, and used. She had opened her heart, believing his confession, believing that the connection between them was real. And now he was dismissing it as a byproduct of adrenaline. I see, she whispered, the hurt turning into a defensive shell. Just business. Just business, Luca confirmed, though his hand paused over the paper, the pen digging deep into the page. Maya turned and walked out of the door, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood. She did not slam the door. She closed it with a soft, final click inside the office. Luca watched her go. As soon as the latch caught, he dropped the pen. He put his head in his hands, his fingers gripping his hair. His chest heaved with the effort of breathing. It is better this way, he told himself, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. If she hates me, she will leave. If she leaves, she lives. Maya threw herself into the preparations for the gala with a frantic energy. She micromanaged the florists, argued with the lighting technicians, and reorganized the seating chart 4 times. If she stopped moving, she would have to feel the hollow ache in her chest. So she simply did not stop. The gala was 2 days away when Daniel Reyes found her. She was taking a break in the alley behind Aurora, shivering in the cool autumn air, trying to get away from the noise of the sound check inside. Maya, Daniel said. She jumped, spinning around. The detective stood at the mouth of the alley, his hands in the pockets of his beige trench coat. He looked tired, his kind face lined with stress. I am on break. Daniel, Maya said defensively, I do not have anything to say to you. I am not here to ask questions, Daniel said, stepping closer. I am here to make you an offer. He pulled a thick manila envelope from his coat and held it out. What is this? Maya asked. Not taking it. Proof, Daniel said. He opened the flap and pulled out a stack of photographs. He fanned them out like a deck of cards. They were grainy surveillance photos, a body in a trunk, a burning warehouse, a man with a shattered face lying in a hospital bed. This is Luca Romano's world. Maya, Daniel said, his voice hard, this is not a romance novel. This is blood and bone. The man you are protecting? This is what he does. Maya looked at the photos. She felt bile rise in her throat. She knew, intellectually, that Luca was a criminal. But seeing the violence captured in glossy print was different. It was ugly. It was terrifying. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because the feds are moving in, Daniel said. The Kane syndicate is escalating. The city is about to become a war zone. I can get you out. Maya, I can put you in witness protection, but you have to cooperate. You have to tell me what you know about the gala. I do not know anything, Maya said, backing away. It is just a charity event. Daniel looked at her with pity. You are a smart girl, Maya, but you are blinded by him. You think because he bought your father's debt that he is a saint? He's a monster who wears a nice suit. Maya turned her head away, tears pricking her eyes. She remembered Luca's hands on her face. She remembered the way he had looked at her in the diner memory, but she also remembered his coldness this morning, his dismissal. Think about it, Daniel said. Here is my card. Call me before Saturday, please. He tucked the card into her pocket and walked away. Maya stood there for a long time, trembling. She was torn apart. Half of her wanted to run to Daniel, to take the safety he offered and never look back. The other half was tethered to the penthouse, to the memory of a man who had held her through a storm. She decided to go back inside. She needed water. She needed to think. As she walked past the service entrance, she heard a voice. It was Daniel. He hadn't left. He was standing just around the corner, talking on his cell phone. She paused, not wanting to face him again. Yeah, I talked to her, Daniel said. His voice different now. Colder, sharper. She is wavering. I think she will flip. Maya held her breath, pressing herself against the brick wall. And if she does not? Daniel listened to the person on the other end. He sighed. Look, if things get messy at the gala, they get messy. We need to take Romano and Kane down. If the girl gets caught in the crossfire, well, collateral damage might be unavoidable. She made her choice. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Collateral damage. Daniel Reyes, the kind detective with the soft eyes, the man who had promised her safety, was willing to let her die to get his badge of honor. He didn't care about her. To him, she was just a pawn, just like she was to the Kane syndicate. The realization hit her with crystal clarity. The law would not save her, the only person who had ever actually tried to protect her, even at the cost of his own happiness. Was the man sitting in the office upstairs trying to make her hate him? Maya moved. She didn't walk, she ran. She burst through the kitchen, startling the chefs, flew up the back stairs, and marched down the hallway to Luca's office. The guards at the door moved to stop her, but the look on her face made them hesitate. She shoved past them and threw the doors open. Luca was standing by the window. He turned, his face setting into that familiar, stony mask. I told you to knock. Maya, he said coldly. Cut the act. Luca. Maya snapped. She slammed the door shut behind her and locked it. Luca blinked, taken aback by her fury. Excuse me? I know what you are doing, she said, marching across the room. You are being an ass because you think it will make me leave. You think if you hurt my feelings, I will run into the arms of the police and be safe. I do not know what you are talking about, Luca said, though his eyes shifted away from hers. I just heard Daniel Reyes on the phone, Maya said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. He called me collateral damage. He said if things get messy at the gala, he does not care if I get hurt. Luca went still. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray. He said that? Yes, Maya said, so you can stop pretending that pushing me away is going to save me. Nobody is going to save me, Luca, except maybe you. Luca stared at her for a long moment. Then, the mask cracked, his shoulders slumped, and he let out a long, ragged breath. He walked over to his desk and leaned against it, looking suddenly incredibly weary. I tried, he whispered. I tried so hard to make you hate me. I know, Maya said, stepping closer, but you are a terrible actor. Luca looked up at her, a wry, sad smile touching his lips. He ran a hand over his face. You are right. The gala, it is a trap. I knew it, Maya said. Victor Kane is coming, Luca explained, his voice low and serious. He plans to make a public hit. He wants to kill me in front of the city's elite to prove that he is the new king. If I cancel the event, I look weak. If I run, I lose everything. So what is the plan? Maya asked. I am not just fighting him. Maya, I am ending it. Luca stood up, his energy shifting from defeat to determination. I have been working on a deal for months. I am selling the territories. I am dissolving the organization. Maya's eyes widened. You are getting out? Completely, Luca said. I am shifting everything into legitimate assets. Real estate, shipping, hospitality. By Monday morning, the Romano crime family will cease to exist. But to do that, I need to survive Saturday night, and I need to take Victor Kane off the board. Maya looked at him. He was dismantling his empire. He was burning down the only world he had ever known, and she knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that he was doing it for her, to be the man he thought she deserved. I can help, Maya said. No. Luca shook his head immediately. It is too dangerous. I know the floor plan better than you do. Luca, Maya argued, I placed every table. I know where the blind spots are for the cameras. I know which service corridors have the creaky floorboards. I know how the staff moves. Maya, if you want to trap Kane without getting half the city killed, you need me, she insisted. You need to know exactly where to funnel his men. You need a traffic controller. Luca looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the set of her jaw. She wasn't asking for permission, she was offering an alliance. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her, his gaze intense. If you do this, there is no going back, he said softly. If you stand with me now, you are standing against the law and the mob. I already told you, Maya said, holding his gaze. I am tired of running. They worked through the night, the office. Once a place of cold distance, became a war room. They ordered takeout and ate it straight from the cartons, hunched over the massive blueprints spread across Luca's desk. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't the jagged, angry tension of the morning. It was a focused, electric hum. They were a team. Here, Maya said, pointing to a service corridor with her chopstick. If Kane comes in through the main entrance, his men will try to flank you from the kitchen. But if we block this hallway with the catering carts, then they have to go through the east wing, Luca finished, his eyes lighting up. Where my security team will be waiting. Exactly. Maya nodded. She leaned in to mark the spot on the map with a red pen. Her shoulder brushed against his arm. They both froze. The contact was electric. Maya didn't pull away. She stayed there, feeling the warmth of him through his shirt. She could smell the scent of him, coffee and sandalwood and fatigue. Luca turned his head slowly. His face was inches from hers. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face, tracing the curve of her jaw, the line of her lips. You are brilliant, he murmured. I am just organized, Maya whispered. I trust you, Luca said. His voice was rough, sincere, more than anyone. I have never trusted anyone with my life before. Maya looked at him. She saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the weight of the world he was carrying. She saw the man who had waited years just to talk to her. She didn't think. She just moved. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a question this time. It wasn't a frantic, adrenaline-fueled collision. It was soft. It was deliberate. It was a statement. I am here. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Luca made a sound deep in his throat and turned his body toward her. His arms came around her, pulling her in, not crushing her, but holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning world. The kiss deepened, becoming slow and languid. Maya sighed into his mouth, her hands sliding up his chest to rest on his shoulders. Her body relaxed against his, fitting into the spaces of him as if she had been made to be there. They broke apart slowly, lingering in the space between breaths. Luca rested his chin on the top of her head, wrapping his arms fully around her, enclosing her in a cocoon of warmth. Maya pressed her cheek against his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. We are going to be okay, she whispered into his shirt. I promise, Luca said, his voice vibrating against her ear. I promise you, Maya. After tomorrow night, we are free. They stayed like that for a long time, clinging to each other in the quiet office, stealing a few hours of peace before the storm broke. Saturday night arrived in a flurry of diamonds and champagne. Aurora had been transformed. The sleek, modern lounge was now a glittering ballroom. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto the crowd of Riverton's elite. Senators rubbed elbows with tech moguls. Socialites laughed over flutes of vintage sparkling wine. Maya moved through the crowd, a clipboard in her hand, though she didn't need it. She was wearing a dress Luca had bought for her, a long, sleeveless gown of midnight blue silk that skimmed her body like water. It was simple, elegant, and completely stunning. She felt exposed, but she also felt powerful. She knew where every exit was. She knew where every guard was positioned. She knew the battlefield. She scanned the room. Luca was near the stage, talking to the city councilman. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo. He was playing the part of the charming host perfectly, smiling, shaking hands, but Maya could see the tension in his shoulders. She saw his hand constantly drifting to his ear, checking his earpiece every few minutes. His eyes would find her in the crowd. He would check on her, a quick, intense glance that said, "Are you okay?" Before returning his attention to the room, Maya sensed eyes on her from the other side of the room. She turned. Daniel Reyes was standing near the entrance, holding a drink he wasn't drinking. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit poorly, looking uncomfortable. When he saw Maya, his expression hardened. He didn't look at her with kindness anymore. He looked at her like she was an obstacle. Maya lifted her chin and turned away. She had made her choice. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The doors opened, and a hush fell over the room that had nothing to do with respect and everything to do with fear. Victor Kane had arrived. He walked in with an entourage of 6 men. Kane was older than Luca, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and eyes that were flat and dead. He wasn't on the guest list, but nobody stopped him. The tension in the room crackled. It was palpable. Like the static before a lightning strike, the guests sensed the predator in their midst. Luca turned from the stage. He didn't look surprised. He nodded once to Kane, a cold, acknowledging gesture. Kane smiled back, a smile that showed too many teeth. It was starting. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She tapped her earpiece, checking in with the security team. "Positions," she whispered. "Copy that," came the reply. She needed to get to the bar. That was her station when the chaos started. She began to weave through the crowd, her silk dress rustling against her legs. She reached the main bar. The bartenders were moving in a blur, mixing drinks for the nervous guests. "Hey, Maya," one of the bartenders, a young guy named Leo, flagged her down. He slid a glass across the polished marble counter toward her. "What is this?" Maya asked. "I am working." "Leo, I cannot drink. It is from the boss," Leo said with a wink. He sent a message back, said it is a special reserve, just for you. A surprise. Maya looked at the glass. It was a heavy crystal tumbler, filled with an amber liquid that caught the light of the chandeliers. It looked like the same whiskey Luca drank. She reached out and took the glass. It felt heavier than it should have. "From the boss," she repeated softly. "A surprise." She lifted the glass, intending to take a small sip to calm her nerves. As she raised it, the liquid swirled, and something metal clinked softly against the crystal bottom. She frowned, lowering the glass to look inside, before her eyes could focus on the object resting beneath the amber liquid. The world plunged into darkness. The crystal chandeliers flickered once, twice, and then died. The live band cut out mid-note with a screech of feedback. Screams erupted from the crowd as the emergency lights bathed the room in a harsh, red glow. The trap was sprung. Maya gripped the glass in her hand, her knuckles white, as the first gunshot echoed through the dark. The sound of the first gunshot shattered the illusion of civilized society. It was a sharp, cracking retort that echoed off the crystal chandeliers moments before the emergency lights bathed the room in a blood-red haze. The screaming started an instant later. Maya did not think. She reacted on pure instinct. She dropped to her knees, diving behind the thick marble slab of the bar just as a second shot pulverized a row of expensive liquor bottles on the shelf above her head. Shards of glass and the pungent scent of scotch rained down on her. She curled into a ball, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. her hand still clutching the heavy crystal tumbler Leo had given her moments before. Above the rim of the bar, the room had dissolved into absolute chaos. The elegantly dressed guests were scrambling over overturned tables, slipping on spilled champagne, desperate to find cover. "Get down, stay down," the security team roared, their voices battling against the panic. Maya forced herself to look. She inched up, peering over the edge of the marble counter. The center of the ballroom was a war zone. Victor Kane's men had fanned out in a wedge formation, guns drawn from beneath their dinner jackets. They were cutting a path through the terrified crowd, heading straight for the stage and standing in their path. Alone, in the center of the dance floor, was Luca. He had not run. He had not sought cover. He stood tall, his legs braced apart, a dark handgun held low at his side. He was not firing. He was a statue of terrifying calm amidst the storm, placing his body directly between the assassins and the screaming civilians. Victor Kane stood safely behind his wall of enforcers, a cruel, satisfied grin twisting his face. "It is over. Romano," Victor shouted, his voice carrying over the din. "Look at you, King of the Ashes. Drop the weapon, Victor!" The shout came from the side. Daniel Reyes and 3 plainclothes officers had emerged from the crowd, their service weapons raised, but they were outgunned, and they knew it. The crowd was too dense. They had no clear line of fire without risking the innocent guests. Victor laughed. He reached out and grabbed a passing waitress, a young girl with terror wide in her eyes, and hauled her in front of him like a doll. He pressed the barrel of his gun against her temple. "You want to arrest me, detective?" Victor sneered. "Go ahead, take the shot. Let everyone see how the law protects them." Daniel froze, his gun wavering. Luca took a step forward, raising his weapon slowly. "Let the girl go, Victor," Luca said. His voice was not a shout, but it cut through the noise with lethal precision. "This is between you and me. She is insurance." Victor spat. "Just like that pretty little event planner you have been hiding. Where is she, Luca, watching you die?" Luca did not flinch, but his eyes flickered. For one fraction of a second, his gaze darted toward the bar. He did not look at Maya, but she felt the weight of his attention slam into her. He knew where she was. He was checking to see if she was safe. In that split second, Maya realized the truth. Luca was pinned. He couldn't fire at Victor without hitting the waitress. He couldn't retreat without exposing the guests. He was going to stand there and take the bullet to keep the violence contained. "No," Maya whispered. Her eyes darted around the bar. She knew this room. She had memorized every inch of the schematic. To her right, near the service hatch, was the emergency control panel for the fire suppression system. She looked back at Luca, who was staring down death, ready to sacrifice everything he had built, everything he was, just to keep his promise of protection. "I am not a bystander," she thought fiercely. "I am his partner." Maya dropped the glass she had been holding. It hit the rubber mat with a dull thud. She crawled on her hands and knees, ignoring the glass shards that bit into her palms, scrambling toward the panel. Above her, Victor shouted, "Kill him!" Maya reached the wall. She grabbed the red handle of the master fire alarm and yanked it down with all her strength. The result was instantaneous and cataclysmic. The emergency shutters on the windows slammed down with the sound of crashing steel. The overhead sprinklers did not activate, but the strobe lights did, blinding, high-intensity flashes of white light that pulsed rapidly, turning the room into a disorienting, strobe-lit nightmare. Simultaneously, the fire alarm began to blare, a deafening, ear-piercing siren that drowned out all thought. Victor's men flinched, blindingly disoriented by the assault on their senses. They stumbled, shielding their eyes. "Now!" Luca's voice roared. The room erupted. Luca lunged forward. He didn't shoot Victor. He aimed for the shoulder of the man holding the waitress. The shot was true. Victor howled, his grip loosening just enough for the waitress to scramble away. Luca shoved the girl toward the safety of the pillars, placing himself fully in the open. One of Victor's men fired blindly in panic. Maya saw Luca jerk back. A spray of crimson bloomed on the side of his white dress shirt, just above the hip. "Luca!" Maya screamed. She scrambled up from behind the bar. "Get back!" Daniel shouted at her from across the room, but Maya did not hear him. She did not hear the sirens. She only saw Luca stumble, one hand pressing against his side, his gun still raised. She ran. She ran through the strobe-lit chaos, her blue silk dress flowing behind her like a banner. She reached Luca just as his knees began to buckle. She threw her arm around his waist, wedging her shoulder under his arm to support his weight. "Maya, go," Luca gritted out, his face pale and slick with sweat, his teeth clenched against the pain. "Shut up and lean on me," Maya yelled back. She felt the warm wetness of his blood soaking into her dress, but she planted her feet. Together, they stood their ground, with the element of surprise gone and their leader cornered. Victor's men were faltering. Luca's security team, trained for exactly this kind of surgical violence, moved in, disarming them with ruthless efficiency. Daniel Reyes saw his opening. He advanced on Victor, who was backed against the stage, waving his gun wildly. "It is over, Kane!" Daniel shouted. "Drop it!" Victor looked around. His men were down. The exits were blocked. He looked at Luca, who was bleeding but still standing, held upright by the woman in the blue dress. "I will take you all with me," Victor screamed, raising his weapon toward Maya. Luca didn't hesitate. Even wounded, his aim was steady. He fired a single shot. The bullet struck Victor's hand, shattering the pistol and sending it skittering across the floor. Victor collapsed to his knees, clutching his mangled hand, screaming curses. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic wailing of the fire alarm until someone finally killed the switch. The strobe lights ceased, leaving the room in the stark, unforgiving glare of the emergency floods. Daniel holstered his weapon and kicked Victor's gun away. He looked at the fallen crime lord, then turned his gaze to Luca and Maya. Luca was leaning heavily on Maya, his breathing ragged. He looked at Daniel. "You have your win, detective," Luca rasped. "The Kane Syndicate is finished." Daniel looked at the blood on Luca's shirt. He looked at Maya, who was fiercely clutching Luca's waist, her eyes daring Daniel to try and separate them. "This isn't just a win," Daniel said quietly. "It is a slaughter. I have to take you in. Luca, you know that." "I know," Luca said. He looked down at Maya, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a trembling hand. "I am ready to pay the price. But the deal stands. The evidence is in my safe. It brings down the whole network. Everything." "And in exchange?" Daniel asked. "Leniency," Luca said, "and she is kept out of it. She is a civilian. She was a hostage." Maya started to protest. "Luca, hush," Luca whispered, pressing his forehead against hers for a fleeting second. "Let me do this. Let me be the man who walks away." Daniel looked at them for a long moment. He saw the way they held on to each other, desperate and absolute. He nodded slowly. "Get him to a medic," Daniel said gruffly, turning his back to coordinate the arrest of Victor Kane. "I did not see anything until the ambulances arrived. The months that followed were a blur of grayscale courtrooms, rain-slicked windows, and the slow, grinding gears of justice. The trial of the Romano and Kane crime families was the biggest news story in the state's history." True to his word, Luca dismantled his empire brick by brick. He provided ledgers, names, and bank accounts. He tore down the structure that had raised him, ensuring that no one could ever pick up the pieces and start again. He pleaded guilty to racketeering and illegal gambling. In exchange for his cooperation and the sheer volume of evidence he provided against the corrupt officials and violent offenders in Kane's network, the prosecutors offered a deal. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't life. He served 18 months in a minimum security federal facility. Maya did not run. She did not hide. She stayed in Riverton. She finished her master's degree, working during the day and visiting the prison every Saturday. They spoke through thick glass partitions. They talked about books, about the weather, about the future. They stripped away the layers of boss and employee, protector and protected, until all that was left were two people who had seen the worst of each other and stayed. When the day of his release finally came, Maya was waiting at the gate. Luca walked out into the sunlight wearing a simple pair of jeans and a white t-shirt. He looked different. The hard edge of the dawn was gone, replaced by a quiet, weathered strength. He looked lighter. He didn't say a word. He just walked to her and buried his face in her neck, holding her as if he was trying to absorb her into his skin. 6 months later, the neon sign above the door flickered to life, buzzing with a soft, welcoming hum. The Crossroads. It was a small bar, located 3 blocks from the old diner where a terrified waitress had once served a silent boy in a hoodie. It was not opulent like Aurora. It had warm brick walls, polished wooden floors, and booths upholstered in deep, comfortable velvet. It was a place for neighbors, for friends, for people who wanted a good drink and a quiet conversation. It was Luca's, his first fully legitimate business. The opening night had been a private affair. Just a few close friends, some of the old staff from Aurora who had remained loyal, and Daniel Reyes, who had stopped by to shake Luca's hand and drink a club soda before heading back to his precinct. Now, it was 2 a.m. The guests had left. The door was locked. Maya sat at the bar, tracing the grain of the wood with her finger. Soft jazz played from the speakers, a slow, melancholic trumpet solo that filled the empty room. She watched Luca. He was behind the bar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, washing a glass. He looked at peace. There was a calmness to his movements that she had never seen before. "Are you tired?" she asked softly. "A little," Luca admitted, smiling at her. "But a good kind of tired, the kind where you can sleep at night." He dried his hands on a towel and tossed it aside. "I owe you a drink," he said. "You gave me wine earlier," Maya pointed out. "No," Luca said, his eyes darkening slightly, the memory of a chaotic night in a ballroom passing between them. "I owe you a drink from the boss." "A surprise?" Maya smiled. "I think I am technically a partner now, not an employee." "Silent partner," Luca corrected gently. He turned to the shelf and pulled down a bottle of rare whiskey. He took a heavy crystal glass, identical to the one she had dropped behind the bar at the gala, and poured a measure of the amber liquid. He did not slide it across the bar. He walked around the counter, carrying the glass. He stopped in front of her. The lights in the bar were dim, casting the room in a warm, golden glow. Luca placed the glass on the coaster in front of her. "For you," he said. Maya reached for the glass. It was beautiful, the liquid catching the light. She lifted it toward her lips, the scent of oak and vanilla drifting up. Then she saw it, resting at the bottom of the glass beneath the pale amber liquid. Something glinted. It was a circle of gold, simple and flawless, with a single diamond that caught the overhead light and fractured it into a rainbow. Maya's breath hitched. Her hand trembled, the ice clinking softly against the side of the glass. She lowered the glass slowly to the bar. She looked up. Luca was watching her. His guard was completely down. There were no walls, no secrets, no shadows, just him. He reached out and took the glass from her. He reached 2 fingers into the whiskey and retrieved the ring. He didn't wipe it off. "Years," he whispered, his voice hoarse with an emotion that felt like it might break him. He looked at the ring, then at her. "I sat in that diner for 2 years just to make sure you got home safe," he said. "I built an empire just to make sure I was strong enough to keep the world away from you, and then I tore it all down because I realized I didn't want to be strong. I just wanted to be yours." He took a step back and sank onto one knee. Maya clapped a hand over her mouth, tears spilling hot and fast down her cheeks. "I cannot promise you a perfect life." "Maya," Luca said, looking up at her, "I have a past, I have scars, but I can promise you that from this moment on, there are no more secrets, no more shadows, just us." He held the ring up. "I have waited to do this the right way. Years. I have waited years for you. Will you marry me?" Maya slid off the bar stool. She dropped to her knees in front of him, heedless of her dress on the floor. "Yes," she choked out. "Yes, Luca." He let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He took her hand, his fingers steady now, and slid the whiskey-slicked ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He didn't wait. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him with a fierce, desperate strength. They held each other on the floor of the empty bar, rocking slightly, anchored by the weight of everything they had survived to get here. Luca pulled back just enough to look at her. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. He kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of hunger or desperation. It was a kiss of relief. It was a slow, reverent seal on a promise kept. It tasted of whiskey and hope. Eventually, they stood up. Luca didn't let go of her hand. He reached over and turned up the volume on the music slightly. He pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand with the ring flashing under the lights. They swayed together in the center of the room, foreheads touching, moving to the slow rhythm of the trumpet. Outside, the neon glow of Riverton reflected off the wet pavement, the city moving on, indifferent and loud. But inside, the world was quiet. For the first time in their lives, Maya and Luca were not running, and they were not hiding. They were simply two people in love, ready to face the morning light together. Thank you so much for listening to She Found a Wedding Ring in Her Drink. The Mafia Boss confessed, I've waited years for you. I hope you enjoyed Luca and Maya's journey from the shadows into the light. If this story touched your heart, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for Mafia Romance Stories so you never miss a tale of passion, danger, and redemption. Please share your thoughts on the ending in the comments below. Did Luca make the right choice? I can't wait to hear what you think. Until next time.